Man, oh man, it looks like Stephanie White and the Indiana Fever front office and all that coaching staff are under tremendous heat. They are under fire right now from Fox News, USA Today. I mean, you name it, CBS, Yahoo, ESPN. They are in a lot of heat. And a lot of people now online are calling for an investigation on this coaching staff for potential abuse to Caitlin Clark. We got to get into it. Welcome to Keep the Vision. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share the channel, hit that bell notification, and hype the video. That'd be greatly appreciated. Let's get right in it.
There are moments in sports that stop you mid-scroll. Moments that cut through the noise, that demand your attention not because of a highlight or a buzzer beater, but because something feels deeply, undeniably wrong. This past week, one of those moments arrived, and it arrived wearing Indiana Fever colors. What started as a difficult season for one of the most talked about franchises in women's basketball has now exploded into something far larger. We are no longer talking about shooting slumps or defensive breakdowns. We are talking about a player, one of the most electric, most transformative talents the WNBA has ever seen, being put in a situation that has left fans, analysts, and media figures across the country genuinely alarmed. Caitlin Clark, Stephanie White, a timeout, a grab, a pull.
This is just one instance. You got this Brianne January situation. Then you had this situation here. Stephanie White pulling on her arm, tugging on her, and Caitlin Clark pulling her arm away. Right here. You know, it's just been a non-stop circus, and the people are calling for an investigation into this organization to see what the hell is actually going on, what is going on with these coaches, what's going on with all of it. And then you're going to see here when I can't even
back. And now a reckoning. Welcome. This is the story of how the Indiana Fever found themselves at the center of one of the most controversial controversies in recent WNBA history, and why the questions being asked right now may not have comfortable answers. Let's set the scene. It's a timeout. The Fever are struggling. Tensions have been simmering for weeks, the kind of low boil that every insider can feel but nobody wants to name out loud. The cameras are rolling. They always are when Caitlin Clark is on the floor, because Caitlin Clark is appointment television, a ratings phenomenon, a genuine cultural force. And then it happens. Head coach Stephanie White reaches out and physically grabs Caitlin Clark's arm. Now in isolation, you could argue that's not a major moment.
We saw this interaction with Stephanie White going off on her on the sideline and then throwing the clipboard. I mean, just it's been a lot. And I think it's over between Caitlin Clark and Stephanie White. I mean, you just look at how she's acting, and then you know there's a line. And I think Stephanie White has officially crossed the line with Caitlin Clark, and Caitlin Clark checked out and didn't even want to play. Let's take a look at what KC had to say about it, man. This thing is getting pretty big, man. Every news cycle is definitely major news publication is talking about this.
Coaches are animated, sports are emotional, contact happens, but what followed told a very different story. Clark did not simply absorb the moment and move on. She pulled her arm back, sharply, visibly, with an expression on her face that communicated something unmistakable: surprise, frustration, and a refusal to accept what had just happened. That reaction matters. That reaction is everything. Because Caitlin Clark has been one of the most composed, driven, competitive athletes in sports over the past 2 years. She came into the WNBA with a target on her back, absorbed physical punishment from opponents night after night, handled relentless scrutiny from every corner of the media landscape, and did all of it without flinching.
This publication is talking about this. Many people are calling for an investigation on this staff and for Stephanie White to be fired, man. Myself included. I want Stephanie White fired. I'm not going to leave that out.
I don't watch every Indiana Fever game, but I have seen enough this season to know that something ain't right. For the second or third time this season, I saw Caitlin Clark and Stephanie White arguing with each other during a timeout. Now, when this happened the first time, I didn't think much of it, didn't think it was a big deal. Basketball is emotional. Women are damn sure emotional. There's going to be arguments.
For her to pull back from her own coach on camera in front of a national audience is not nothing. That is a statement, even if it was involuntary. The footage spread across social media within hours. The reaction was swift and it was loud. Here is something important to understand about controversies in the social media era. Silence is never neutral. When an organization chooses not to address something, that choice communicates just as clearly as any press release. The Indiana Fever said nothing. No statement, no clarification, no context offered. Just silence, and that silence acted like gasoline on an already burning fire. Within days, the story had moved well beyond basketball circles. Fox News picked it up. USA Today ran coverage.
There's going to be arguments. There are going to be disagreements. But I don't think what we are seeing between Caitlin Clark and Stephanie White, I don't think these are minor disagreements. Something is seriously wrong here. Whether they don't like each other or they don't respect each other, this is happening far too often for this to be something that the front office can just ignore. Let me show you a couple of things from the fourth quarter last night. One of these is where the Indiana Felines have clearly given up on their coach. Watch for yourself.
ESPN and CBS weighed in. Yahoo Sports amplified the conversation. This was no longer a debate happening in WNBA Twitter threads or niche basketball forums. This was mainstream national news, the kind of coverage that lands in the inboxes of league executives, sponsors, and broadcast partners. The narrative had shifted entirely. Nobody was talking about Clark's field goal percentage or Indiana's playoff positioning. Everybody was talking about whether the most important player in the league, arguably the most important player the WNBA has had in a generation, was being mistreated by the people charged with supporting and developing her. And as more people watched the clip, more people arrived at the same...
Is defense. And the Felines' defense is the drizzling shits. Uncle Casey, that's not true. They rank fourth in the league in defensive rating. Yeah, I don't care about stats. I don't care about analytics. The Felines rank near the bottom of the league in opponents' points per game.
And that's the thing with Stephanie White. Even beyond the Caitlin Clark situation, well, the Caitlin Clark, that's the tip of the iceberg. You can't not be on the same page with the superstar player. But I mean,
uncomfortable conclusion. Something is seriously wrong inside that organization. If the Stephanie White incident had been the only piece of footage circulating, perhaps the story would have faded. Coaching moments get misread. Camera angles distort context. Emotions run high in competitive sports, and sometimes a moment that looks severe is more mundane than it appears. But the arm grab was not the only clip, not even close. A second video surfaced showing assistant coach Brian January engaged in what appeared to be a heated exchange with Clark on the bench. January, a veteran player herself and someone who theoretically understands the pressures elite athletes face, was seen speaking with visible intensity to Clark in a manner that did not read as constructive or supportive. Viewers watching the clip described Clark as visibly deflated, visibly discouraged, the kind of body language you simply do not want to see from a player of her caliber. Then came the clipboard. Another widely circulated clip showed Stephanie White, in the heat of a game, shouting furiously from the sideline before hurling her clipboard to the ground. It was the kind of emotional explosion that would generate commentary regardless of who was coaching and who was playing. But in the context of everything else, the arm grab, the January exchange, the weeks of visible tension, it landed very differently. Critics were no longer analyzing individual incidents. They were reading a pattern. And that pattern told a story about a coaching staff that appears to have lost its emotional footing, a locker room atmosphere that seems to be suffocating rather than liberating its players, and a franchise that has repeatedly allowed its biggest star to exist in an environment of visible conflict and pressure. Let's take a step back and think about what optimal coaching of a generational talent actually looks like. When you have a player of Caitlin Clark's ability, a player who changed the trajectory of an entire league, who brought casual fans to WNBA games for the first time, who has proven beyond any reasonable doubt that she belongs at the highest level, your primary job as a coaching staff is to build an environment where she can express that ability freely and fearlessly. That means she needs to trust you. She needs to feel that when she makes mistakes, you are correcting her without humiliating her. She needs to feel that in the most pressurized moments of a game, the sideline is a source of calm and clarity, not another source of stress. What the footage suggests is that the Indiana Fever coaching staff has failed on every one of those measures. When a player visibly pulls away from her head coach during a timeout, that trust is broken. When a player looks visibly discouraged after a conversation with an assistant coach on the bench, that relationship has curdled. When the head coach is repeatedly losing composure in public, shouting, throwing equipment, the message sent to every player in that locker room is that this is not a safe environment to take risks, to play freely, to fail forward. Analysts have noted that elite athletes often describe their best seasons in terms of freedom, the feeling that they can make plays without the fear of catastrophic consequences if something goes wrong. What we are watching in Indiana appears to be the opposite of that. It appears to be a team playing tight, playing cautious, playing not to lose rather than playing to win. And the performance on the court has reflected that energy. Let's be honest about what is happening publicly right now, because it is significant. Fans have flooded the Indiana Fever's social media accounts. The league's own platforms are receiving messages demanding action. Sports commentators who cover the WNBA as their primary beat are speaking in unusually direct terms about the need for the organization to address what is happening. And crucially, the calls for accountability are not coming from people who dislike Caitlin Clark or want the Fever to fail. They are coming from people who care deeply about the league and believe that what they are watching is harmful. Harmful to a player, harmful to a franchise, harmful to the broader story that women's basketball has been building over the past several years. That story, the one about record attendance, skyrocketing television ratings, sold-out arenas, and a new generation of fans discovering the WNBA through the prism of Caitlin Clark's brilliance, is too valuable to allow it to be undermined by a coaching staff apparently incapable of managing its own emotions and its relationship with its best player. Several prominent voices in sports media have pointed out that stars of Clark's profile would typically receive a level of institutional support that makes navigating the pressures of elite competition manageable. The best organizations in sports, in any league, understand that protecting your generational talent is not optional. It is the job. It is the whole job. By that standard, the Indiana Fever front office has questions to answer. Let's address the most direct question that this situation has raised. Should Stephanie White still be the head coach of the Indiana Fever? This is not a question being asked only by fans online. Credible media voices have raised it. Former players have hinted at it. And increasingly, the answer that serious observers are arriving at is uncomfortable for the organization. There is a version of this story where Stephanie White is a coach who cares deeply, who is under enormous pressure, who made mistakes in difficult moments, and whose worst moments have been amplified by a media environment hungry for conflict. That version deserves acknowledgement. Coaching in the modern WNBA, especially coaching Caitlin Clark, is not a simple assignment, but good intentions do not excuse a pattern. And what has emerged over the course of this season does appear to be a pattern of public displays of frustration that spill over into the player experience, a visible tension with the franchise cornerstone, of a sideline environment that looks, from the outside, like one nobody is enjoying. Whether or not a formal investigation is the right mechanism, and multiple voices across the sports landscape have now called for exactly that, the front office cannot afford to look away. Every week of silence, every week of allowing the footage to circulate without meaningful response, erodes the credibility of the organization a little further. The Indiana Fever are sitting on a golden opportunity. Caitlin Clark is one of the rare athletes who transcends a sport, who makes the casual fan curious, who generates the kind of cultural conversation that most leagues would spend billions trying to manufacture. Squandering that by allowing a toxic environment to fester would be one of the most consequential front office failures in recent memory. Zoom out for a moment, because this story is not only about Indiana. The WNBA has spent years fighting for the recognition it deserves. It has fought against inadequate salaries, insufficient media coverage, travel conditions that no comparable professional athlete would accept, and a persistent cultural dismissiveness that has required enormous patience and resilience to overcome. And then Caitlin Clark arrived, and things changed, not just incrementally, dramatically. The numbers are extraordinary, attendance records shattered, television ratings that shocked even optimistic observers, merchandise flying off shelves. A level of mainstream interest that the league has never experienced before. Clark has been, without question, the most important thing to happen to the WNBA's visibility in a generation, which makes the optics of this situation all the more alarming from a league perspective. Because if the story of the 2025 WNBA season becomes not the story of Clark's growth as a player, not the story of the Fever's competitive development, but the story of whether the league's most visible star is being mistreated by her own coaching staff, that is a narrative that does real damage. It invites the kind of scrutiny that the league, its players, and its advocates have worked incredibly hard to redirect toward the game itself and away from the surrounding drama. Commissioner Kathy Engelbert and the WNBA front office are watching. They have to be. And the pressure on them to act, or at minimum to be seen engaging with the situation, is only going to grow. This story is not finished. Not by a long way. The Indiana Fever have a choice to make, and they need to make it soon. Continued silence is not a neutral option. Every day that passes without a meaningful response from the organization is another day that the narrative hardens, another day that fans, media, and the league itself draws its own conclusions in the absence of information. Those conclusions, right now, are not kind. Caitlin Clark deserves better. She deserves a coaching staff that builds her up rather than wears her down. She deserves a sideline culture that channels her competitive intensity rather than creating new sources of friction and stress. She deserves an organization that protects its investment, and more importantly, that recognizes its responsibility to one of the most talented players to ever put on a basketball jersey. Whether that means changes to the coaching staff, a formal review of the program's culture, or simply a long overdue conversation between the front office and everyone involved, something has to give. The camera caught the moment. The world has been watching. The question now is whether the Indiana Fever have the self-awareness and the institutional courage to respond to what it revealed. The clock is ticking. If you want to stay locked in on everything Indiana Fever and Caitlin Clark, make sure you're subscribed, hit that notification bell, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Stephanie White should keep her job? Should the WNBA get involved? Let us know. See you in the next one.